The strange thing about respect is that most people spend their entire lives chasing it without ever understanding what it really is. They think respect comes from being louder, more successful, more feared, more dominant, more admired. But if you observe people carefully, truly observe them, you begin to notice something disturbing. The men who desperately demand respect rarely receive it, and the people who quietly carry genuine respect often never ask for it at all, because respect is not built through performance. It is revealed through psychological gravity. You can feel it when someone enters a room. Nobody announces it. Nobody explains it. Yet the atmosphere changes. Some people speak constantly, but nobody listens. Others barely speak, and the room unconsciously leans toward them. Why? Because human beings are not only responding to words, they are responding to emotional signals buried beneath words, signals older than language itself. Most people don't understand this. They think respect is a social reward, but respect is actually a psychological reaction. And once you understand the hidden psychology behind it, you begin seeing human behavior differently forever. You begin noticing why some people are ignored, why some are used, why some are betrayed, why some are admired, why some are feared, why some are quietly protected by others. And perhaps the most painful realization of all, you begin understanding why certain people lose respect the moment they start begging for love, because respect and approval are not the same thing. In fact, many times, they destroy each other. A man can be liked by everyone in the room and still be respected by nobody. That is one of the cruelest truths about human nature. From childhood, people are conditioned to believe goodness automatically creates respect. Be polite, be agreeable, avoid conflict, make everyone comfortable. And while kindness matters, reality is darker than that. Human beings do not only respect kindness, they respect emotional stability, boundaries, self-control, inner certainty, especially under pressure, because pressure reveals hierarchy. Anyone can appear calm when life is easy. Anyone can appear confident when they are praised. Anyone can appear loyal when nothing is at risk. But pressure exposes the nervous system. Pressure exposes identity. Pressure exposes emotional weakness. And deep down, people instinctively study this. Even unconsciously, imagine a man sitting silently at a dinner table while others mock him indirectly. Little sarcastic comments, small disrespectful jabs disguised as jokes. Everyone watches, even if nobody admits it. Then the man reacts emotionally. His voice rises, his face tightens. He begins over-explaining himself, trying desperately to regain control, trying to prove his worth. The energy changes immediately, not because he defended himself, but because he emotionally collapsed under pressure. People often misunderstand respect. They think it means winning every confrontation. But psychologically, respect is often tied to emotional containment. The ability to remain centered while chaos attempts to pull you apart. This is why Stoic philosophy still resonates thousands of years later. Not because Stoicism teaches emotional suppression, but because it understands something terrifying about human beings. People unconsciously trust emotional stability. A person who controls themselves appears psychologically dangerous. Not dangerous in a violent sense. Dangerous in the sense that they are difficult to manipulate, difficult to provoke, difficult to emotionally dominate, and humans instinctively recognize this. Carl Jung once wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most disrespect is rooted in unconscious dynamics. People test each other constantly. Not always maliciously, sometimes instinctively. A friend cancels plans repeatedly. A coworker interrupts you. A partner speaks to you differently after seeing you tolerate certain behavior. These moments seem small, but psychologically, they are rarely small. Human beings are constantly gathering information about what you tolerate, not because everyone is evil, but because people naturally search for emotional boundaries. And when boundaries disappear, respect often disappears with them. This creates one of the deepest internal conflicts in modern life. Many people want to be perceived as good, easygoing, understanding, non-confrontational. But somewhere along the way, they begin abandoning themselves to maintain external harmony. They say yes when they mean no. They laugh when they feel hurt. They remain silent when they feel violated. They tolerate behavior they secretly resent. And over time, something inside them begins to rot. Not because others hurt them, but because they betrayed their own internal truth repeatedly. This is where resentment is born, not only toward others, toward oneself. There are men walking through life carrying years of invisible anger. Because they spent too long trying to be accepted, they confuse self-erasure with maturity. But respect cannot grow where self-abandonment lives. Because the human nervous system communicates truth before words ever do. You can hear it in someone's voice, see it in their posture, feel it in their hesitation. People know when you fear losing them, even if you never say it. And the tragic reality is this: the more desperately someone seeks approval, the more psychologically vulnerable they appear. This is why emotionally dependent people are often disrespected, not because they are weak humans, but because dependence changes behavior. It creates fear. Fear creates neediness. Neediness creates self-betrayal. And self-betrayal slowly destroys inner authority. Respect begins internally before it is ever external. A man who secretly believes he is disposable will unconsciously communicate it. He over-explains, over-apologizes, over-chases, over-gives. Not from generosity, from fear. Fear that if he stops performing, he will no longer be valued. And people sense this. Human beings are extraordinarily sensitive to emotional energy. Far more than logic. Someone can say all the right words and still feel insecure. Someone else can say almost nothing and radiate certainty. And certainty changes social reality. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He believed weakness was not merely physical. It was psychological dependence, the inability to stand alone with one's own mind. That is why loneliness terrifies so many people, because solitude forces confrontation with identity. When nobody validates you, who are you? When nobody praises you, who are you? When nobody desires you, who are you? Most people never truly answer these questions. They distract themselves instead. Relationships, attention, noise, social media, constant stimulation. But respect grows in silence, because silence exposes truth. There is something unsettling about a person who no longer needs constant approval, not because they hate people, but because they are psychologically rooted in themselves. These people move differently. They don't rush to prove intelligence. They don't panic when misunderstood. They don't collapse emotionally when rejected. And ironically, this often attracts more respect, because humans admire emotional independence, not perfection, not dominance, not arrogance, inner steadiness. But modern culture confuses respect with visibility, followers, money, status, public attention. Yet some of the most publicly admired people privately command no real respect at all. People may envy them, desire them, fear them, use them. But respect is different. Respect contains an element of trust, even silent trust. You respect people whose behavior feels internally aligned, people who remain themselves under pressure, people who do not shapeshift constantly to satisfy the crowd. That consistency matters psychologically, because inconsistency creates unease. Imagine someone who changes personality depending on who enters the room. Confident around weaker people, submissive around powerful people, cruel toward those beneath them, charming toward those above them. Everyone notices, even subconsciously. And while such people may gain temporary social success, they rarely gain deep respect, because respect requires integrity, not moral perfection, alignment, the alignment between inner values and external behavior. This is why betrayal destroys people so deeply, not only because trust is broken, but because the mind struggles to reconcile contradiction. The person said one thing, did another, pretended loyalty, carried hidden motives. The nervous system experiences this almost like psychological whiplash. And once someone is perceived as internally fragmented, respect deteriorates rapidly. Schopenhauer once observed that people take limits for insults. That statement reveals something uncomfortable about human ego. Many people do not actually want honest relationships. They want unrestricted access, access to your time, your energy, your emotions, your attention. And the moment you create boundaries, they interpret it emotionally. Because boundaries force people to confront the reality that they are not entitled to you. This is why learning to say no changes social dynamics immediately. Not because the word itself is powerful, but because boundaries reveal self-respect. And self-respect alters how others psychologically categorize you. People often say they want honesty, but honesty without emotional strength creates chaos. A person who constantly unloads every emotion impulsively may appear authentic, yet unstable. Another person calmly communicates truth without emotional collapse. That creates safety. And safety matters more than people realize. Humans respect nervous systems that feel grounded. This is why certain individuals become emotional anchors within groups, families, friendships, workplaces. When tension rises, everyone looks toward them, not necessarily because they are the loudest, but because they remain emotionally coherent. Coherence creates trust. Trust creates influence. Influence creates respect. But there is another darker layer to all of this. Sometimes people lose respect for others because confronting them would force uncomfortable self-awareness. A disciplined person unintentionally exposes undisciplined people. An honest person exposes deception. A calm person exposes emotional chaos. And human beings often resent mirrors. This explains why some people attack those they secretly admire. The attack is not always hatred. Sometimes it is psychological defense. If another person's existence reminds you of your own weakness, criticizing them becomes emotionally easier than changing yourself. This happens everywhere. A man begins improving himself quietly, reading more, speaking less, drinking less, becoming emotionally disciplined. Suddenly, old friends mock him, call him different, arrogant, too serious. But beneath the mockery often lives discomfort. Because transformation disrupts social equilibrium, people become attached to familiar versions of you, especially versions that make them feel psychologically comfortable. Growth threatens that comfort. And this is one of the loneliest parts of self-respect. The more aligned you become with yourself, the fewer people can access you casually. Not because you hate people, because your standards change. You begin protecting your peace, protecting your attention, protecting your energy. And many people interpret this distance personally. But psychologically, mature self-respect often looks like emotional selectiveness, not coldness, discernment. The older some people become, the more they realize exhaustion is not caused only by work. It is caused by emotional leakage. Too many conversations without meaning, too many relationships without reciprocity, too much performance, too much pretending. So eventually, they become quieter. Not because they are broken, because they are finally listening to themselves. There is a reason silence unsettles insecure people. Silence removes social reassurance. Many individuals depend heavily on external feedback to regulate identity. Conversation reassures them, attention reassures them, validation reassures them. But a person comfortable in silence communicates something psychologically unusual. They are not emotionally starving, and emotional starvation changes human behavior more than most people realize. A starving person negotiates against themselves. They tolerate disrespect. They cling to unhealthy dynamics. They remain where they are unloved because loneliness feels more frightening than self-betrayal. But eventually, reality collects its debt. The person begins feeling invisible inside their own life. And perhaps that is the deepest form of disrespect. Not being insulted, not being rejected. Abandoning yourself so completely that you no longer recognize your own reflection emotionally. Many men experience this without ever articulating it. They wake up exhausted, disconnected, numb. Not because life destroyed them, because years of suppressing truth hollowed them out internally. They became who others wanted, responsible, pleasant, useful, predictable. But somewhere underneath all of it, the authentic self became buried. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves rejected, hidden, or denied. And the shadow becomes dangerous when ignored, not because darkness itself is evil, but because suppression creates unconscious behavior. A man who suppresses anger completely may suddenly explode years later. A man who suppresses sadness may become emotionally detached. A man who suppresses desire for authenticity may become quietly resentful toward everyone around him. Real self-respect requires integration, the ability to face uncomfortable truths within yourself honestly. Your insecurity, your ego, your fear, your envy, your loneliness, your desire for recognition. Because people who refuse self-awareness become controlled by unconscious patterns. And unconscious people are easily manipulated by emotion. That is why emotionally reactive individuals are often disrespected socially. Not because emotions are weakness, but because unconscious emotions create unpredictability. Predictability matters. Imagine two leaders facing crisis. One panics visibly, blames others, loses emotional control. The other feels fear too, but remains composed. Speaks carefully, acts deliberately. Which nervous system feels safer to follow? Humans instinctively answer this question constantly. Respect is deeply connected to emotional safety, not comfort, safety. A person who cannot regulate themselves becomes psychologically difficult to trust. This is why maturity is less about appearing powerful and more about emotional responsibility. Can you carry your emotions without forcing everyone else to carry them for you? Can you feel anger without becoming destructive? Can you feel pain without becoming manipulative? Can you feel rejection without losing dignity? These abilities transform social perception, and strangely, many people only begin understanding respect after experiencing humiliation. Humiliation changes perception. A public rejection, a betrayal, being ignored, being mocked, being discarded by someone once loved deeply. These moments wound the ego severely, but sometimes they also awaken consciousness because pain forces reflection. A man sits alone at night replaying conversations in his head, wondering why he tolerated certain things, wondering why he remained silent, wondering why he begged someone to stay who clearly wanted to leave, and in that darkness, something shifts. He begins understanding that respect cannot be negotiated from desperation. You cannot convince people to value what you constantly devalue yourself. That realization changes behavior slowly. He speaks differently, walks differently, chooses differently, not because he became emotionless, because he finally stopped abandoning himself for temporary attachment. And that is another hidden truth. People often become stronger after emotional devastation because illusion dies. Illusion about others, illusion about themselves, illusion about love, illusion about validation. Suffering strips away fantasy. Existential philosophers understood this deeply. Human beings spend much of life escaping uncomfortable truths: mortality, isolation, meaninglessness, rejection. But confronting these realities honestly creates psychological depth. A person who has suffered consciously often carries a different energy, less performative, less naive, more grounded. Not because pain is beautiful, but because pain clarifies. It teaches what truly matters. And one thing it teaches repeatedly is that external respect without internal respect feels empty. You can achieve status and still feel worthless internally. You can gain admiration and still secretly hate yourself, because self-respect cannot be outsourced. No relationship can permanently give it to you. No audience can permanently give it to you. No amount of attention can permanently give it to you. At some point, you must decide whether your identity belongs to the crowd or to your own conscience. That decision defines entire lives. Some people spend decades performing identities that are socially rewarded but spiritually dead, successful on the outside, empty on the inside, and eventually the body begins revealing the truth. Anxiety, depression, restlessness. Burnout, because the nervous system knows when you are living against yourself. Respect begins there, in the private relationship between you and your own mind, long before the world notices anything, long before confidence becomes visible. There are moments nobody sees, moments where character is built invisibly, choosing discipline when nobody is watching, walking away from disrespect quietly, telling the truth when lying would be easier, remaining calm during emotional storms. These moments slowly construct identity. And identity radiates, not through motivational speeches, through behavior. People trust behavior more than words, always. Someone can speak beautifully about loyalty while betraying everyone around them. Someone else can barely articulate emotions, but consistently show up with integrity. Respect follows patterns, not promises. This is why children often remember emotional consistency more than verbal affection. A father may say he loves his son constantly, but if his behavior is unstable, aggressive, or absent, the nervous system remembers instability. Another father may speak very little, yet create emotional safety consistently. And deep respect grows there naturally because respect is not only intellectual, it is embodied. You feel it. That feeling explains why certain people remain unforgettable, not because they were perfect, because they were psychologically real. Realness is becoming rare. Modern life rewards image management, curated identities, carefully edited personalities. People learn how to appear confident, appear intelligent, appear successful, but appearances cannot sustain deep relationships forever. Eventually, masks crack. And when someone has built identity entirely around external validation, the collapse becomes terrifying. Because beneath the performance, there is no stable self. This is why some individuals panic when criticized. Criticism threatens the entire structure. Meanwhile, another person hears criticism calmly, reflects, accepts useful truth, rejects manipulation, continues forward. That emotional flexibility creates respect, not rigid ego. Ironically, many people lose respect precisely because they are too obsessed with protecting their image. They cannot admit mistakes, cannot apologize sincerely, cannot appear vulnerable honestly. But mature respect includes humility, not self-humiliation. Humility, the ability to acknowledge imperfection without collapsing psychologically. A person comfortable admitting fault appears internally secure. An insecure ego fights constantly to appear flawless. And eventually, everyone senses the performance. There is something deeply exhausting about people who are always pretending strength, pretending happiness, pretending superiority, pretending indifference, especially pretending not to care. Many people mistake emotional numbness for power, but emotional numbness is often unprocessed pain wearing armor. True emotional strength is different. It allows feeling without drowning, connection without dependency, care without self-erasure. That balance is rare, and rarity naturally attracts respect, not because it is flashy, because it feels authentic. Authenticity is psychologically magnetic because most people secretly feel fragmented. They have different personalities for different environments, different masks for different groups, different emotional performances for different expectations. So when they encounter someone psychologically integrated, it stands out immediately. Even silence feels heavier around them. This is why some people command attention without trying. Their identity is not scattered everywhere. They are internally present. And presence changes perception. Think about the people who impacted your life most deeply. Often, it was not the loudest person, not the most charismatic, not the most socially dominant. Usually, it was someone who made you feel emotionally seen, emotionally safe, emotionally grounded. Respect grows naturally around people who reduce psychological chaos. But here is another uncomfortable truth. Some people only respect what they fear losing, not because they are evil, because certainty breeds unconscious complacency. When someone believes you will tolerate anything, they stop valuing your presence consciously. This happens in friendships, relationships, families, workplaces. People begin assuming your emotional labor is endless, your patience is permanent, your forgiveness automatic, until one day you leave, and suddenly your value becomes visible. Absence reveals importance more clearly than constant availability. That is why emotionally mature individuals understand the power of withdrawal, not manipulative withdrawal, protective withdrawal, the ability to step back from environments that continuously damage self-respect. Many people stay too long in psychologically unhealthy situations because they fear being alone. But loneliness and self-betrayal create very different kinds of pain. Loneliness hurts quietly, self-betrayal destroys identity, and identity is difficult to rebuild once repeatedly abandoned. That is why boundaries matter, not as weapons, as psychological protection. A boundary says, I value my inner world enough to protect it. That energy changes relationships immediately. Not everyone will like it, but respect and approval rarely travel together for long. This becomes painfully obvious in adulthood. The more honest you become, the more selective your relationships become. Some people disappear when access becomes limited. Others become uncomfortable when manipulation stops working. And while this loss initially feels painful, it often creates clarity. You begin realizing how many relationships were sustained not by mutual respect, but by emotional convenience. Convenience is fragile, respect is durable. Respect survives disagreement. Convenience disappears the moment sacrifice appears. This is why adversity reveals relationships brutally. When life becomes difficult, masks fall. Some people vanish, some betray, some remain. And those who remain during darkness often become unforgettable because loyalty under pressure carries enormous psychological weight. Anyone can stand beside you when you are successful. Very few remain when you are broken. The human heart remembers this forever. There are moments in life when respect becomes more valuable than love, because love without respect becomes unstable, controlling, humiliating, conditional. But respect preserves dignity, even during conflict, even during endings. A person who truly respects you does not need to destroy your identity to leave your life. That distinction matters. Some people weaponize intimacy once emotional connection fades. They expose vulnerabilities, mock weaknesses, attack insecurities. Not because hatred suddenly appeared, because emotional immaturity seeks power during pain, and this reveals another hidden layer of human psychology. People often reveal their true level of character not when they love you, but when they are disappointed by you. Can they remain humane during emotional discomfort? Can they communicate without cruelty? Can they leave without psychological destruction? These questions reveal maturity, and maturity creates lasting respect. The world often glorifies confidence, but many confident people are internally fragile. Real respect is connected more deeply to self-awareness than performance. A self-aware person understands their darkness, their ego, their emotional triggers, their insecurities. This awareness creates restraint. A dangerous person without self-awareness becomes destructive. A strong person with self-awareness becomes disciplined. That discipline creates trust, and trust is the hidden foundation beneath almost all genuine respect. Without trust, admiration becomes shallow, fear becomes temporary, charm becomes manipulation, trust anchors everything. This is why honesty matters psychologically. Not brutal honesty used as an excuse for cruelty, but congruent honesty. Words aligned with behavior, intentions aligned with actions. Humans relax around congruence. The nervous system constantly searches for contradiction. When someone says they care but repeatedly disappears, tension emerges. When someone says they respect boundaries but violates them emotionally, tension emerges. But when words and behavior align consistently, the body relaxes. And where the body relaxes, respect grows naturally. Many people spend years trying to appear powerful, but true power often looks surprisingly calm. It does not need endless validation. It does not scream constantly. It does not chase attention desperately, because inner stability removes the need for excessive performance. A man who knows himself deeply does not need every stranger to agree with him. This does not mean isolation. It means psychological rootedness, and rooted people move differently through life. They choose relationships differently, respond to conflict differently, handle rejection differently. Rejection especially reveals emotional maturity. An insecure ego experiences rejection as annihilation. A grounded identity experiences rejection as information. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will value you. Not everyone will choose you. And, strangely, accepting this reality often increases self-respect. Because desperation fades, you stop chasing universal approval. You stop shrinking yourself for acceptance. You stop performing endlessly. And in that space, authenticity begins breathing again. There is a certain sadness hidden inside many modern lives. People are connected constantly, yet understood rarely. Conversations become shallow. Attention becomes fragmented. Identity becomes digital performance. So when someone encounters genuine depth, genuine listening, genuine emotional presence, it feels almost shocking. Respect grows there too. People remember how you made them feel internally. Did they feel judged constantly, used, dismissed, invisible, or did they feel psychologically safe enough to exist honestly? The ability to create emotional safety without losing your own boundaries is one of the rarest forms of maturity, and perhaps one of the most respected, because deeply respected people are not merely strong, they are emotionally trustworthy. Not perfect, trustworthy. They can hold difficult conversations, handle uncomfortable truths, carry responsibility, remain calm under pressure. This reliability creates emotional gravity. People begin depending on them unconsciously, not because they dominate rooms, because they stabilize them. That stability becomes increasingly valuable in a chaotic world. Modern culture rewards reaction, outrage, impulsivity, constant emotional broadcasting, but psychologically, many people are starving for calm. A calm person in a chaotic environment feels powerful, not because they control others, because they control themselves. And self-control is deeply connected to respect, not rigid suppression, conscious regulation, the ability to pause before reacting, think before speaking, observe before judging. These qualities create wisdom over time. Wisdom is not intelligence alone. It is emotional depth shaped by experience. Many highly intelligent people remain emotionally immature. They understand concepts, but not themselves. And self-ignorance eventually damages relationships because unconscious wounds leak into behavior. An insecure person may seek constant reassurance. A fearful person may become controlling. A rejected person may reject others first. Without awareness, pain becomes personality, but awareness interrupts patterns. And people who confront themselves honestly often become more compassionate too. Not weak, compassionate, because once you understand your own darkness, you become less arrogant about the darkness in others. You stop seeing people as simply good or bad. You begin seeing wounds, fear, conditioning, loneliness. This perspective creates emotional intelligence, and emotionally intelligent people often earn deeper respect over time than merely charismatic people. Because charisma attracts attention, character sustains trust. Attention is easy to gain. Trust is difficult. That is why reputations can collapse overnight. Years of image building destroyed by one revelation of character. Eventually, behavior exposes everyone. And perhaps that is why authenticity matters so much. Pretending endlessly becomes exhausting. At some point, every human being confronts the question, "Who am I?" when nobody is watching. That question defines integrity. The answer shapes destiny more than talent. Because talent without integrity creates instability. Success without integrity creates emptiness. Power without integrity creates destruction. But integrity creates inner peace, and inner peace radiates, not loudly, quietly, like a nervous system no longer at war with itself. That peace changes the eyes, the voice, the presence. People feel it even when they cannot explain it logically. And maybe that is the deepest secret hidden beneath respect. Human beings are not merely responding to status. They are responding to alignment. Alignment between words and actions. Alignment between identity and behavior. Alignment between values and choices. When someone lives in alignment, their presence feels psychologically coherent. And coherence is rare. In a fragmented world, coherent people feel powerful. Not because they are perfect, because they are real. And perhaps realness is what everyone has been searching for all along. Not another performance, not another mask, not another carefully constructed identity. Just someone who stands firmly inside their own truth without needing to destroy others to protect it. That kind of person changes rooms quietly, not through force, through presence. And long after conversations end, long after faces disappear into memory, those are often the people we never forget. Because respect was never truly about dominance. It was about psychological integrity, the courage to remain connected to yourself in a world constantly trying to pull you away from who you really are. And maybe that is why so many people feel exhausted now. Not because they are weak, but because they have spent too many years performing versions of themselves that were never fully true. Every forced smile, every swallowed emotion, every fake agreement, every moment of self-betrayal. The body remembers. The nervous system keeps score. Eventually, exhaustion appears not from physical labor, but from emotional fragmentation. A man wakes up one morning and realizes he no longer knows what he genuinely feels anymore. He has adapted himself to everyone else for so long that authenticity feels unfamiliar, and that realization can become terrifying. Because once you lose connection with yourself, respect from others becomes meaningless. It feels hollow, temporary, like applause inside an empty room. This is why some of the most externally successful people secretly feel miserable. They built an admired identity while abandoning their authentic one, and no amount of praise can permanently silence internal disconnection. At night, the mind becomes honest. When distractions disappear, truth becomes louder. That is why silence frightens so many people. Silence removes escape. No music, no scrolling, no validation, no noise. Only the self. And many people discover they have spent years running from themselves. But self-respect begins exactly there, in the willingness to sit honestly with your own mind, without performance, without distraction, without pretending. To look at your life and ask, where have I betrayed myself? Where have I remained silent out of fear? Where have I tolerated disrespect because loneliness terrified me? Where have I abandoned truth for approval? Those questions hurt. But pain is often the doorway to consciousness. A man who never questions himself becomes dangerous, not because he is evil, because unconsciousness creates repetition. The same toxic relationships, the same emotional reactions, the same self-destructive patterns, again and again, until life finally forces awareness, sometimes through heartbreak, sometimes through humiliation, sometimes through failure, sometimes through isolation. Suffering has a strange way of removing illusion, and illusion is where many forms of false respect are born. People chase admiration instead of meaning, attention instead of connection, status instead of identity. But admiration fades quickly. The crowd changes constantly. Today they praise you, tomorrow they ignore you. If your identity depends entirely on external perception, your emotional state becomes unstable. You become psychologically controlled by reactions, likes, messages, approval, recognition, and eventually the soul becomes exhausted from constantly negotiating for worth. That exhaustion explains why emotionally grounded people feel so different. They are not begging the world to define them. There is strength in that, a quiet strength, not arrogance, not superiority, freedom, freedom from compulsive validation, freedom from emotional dependence, freedom from constantly proving value, and ironically, this freedom often increases respect naturally because humans instinctively admire people who are not psychologically desperate. Desperation changes behavior. It creates emotional chasing, over-talking, over-explaining, over-giving. A desperate person becomes easy to manipulate because fear controls perception. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. But when someone begins respecting themselves internally, fear loses some of its power. They stop trying to force connection, stop forcing conversations, stop forcing relationships that continuously wound them. And in that moment, dignity returns. Dignity is deeply connected to respect, not ego. Dignity, the ability to remain connected to your worth, even during rejection. Many people confuse dignity with pride, but they are different. Pride refuses vulnerability. Dignity refuses self-destruction. A dignified person can love deeply without losing themselves, can care deeply without abandoning boundaries, can walk away without hatred. That emotional balance creates enormous psychological strength. Because hatred often reveals unresolved attachment, people who truly heal do not always become colder. Sometimes they become calmer, less reactive, less chaotic, more selective. They no longer fight for every misunderstanding, no longer chase every explanation, no longer need every person to see their value. And this emotional restraint changes how others perceive them. Not because silence is magic, because emotional self-control communicates stability. Imagine two people after betrayal. One spirals publicly, begging, attacking, threatening, trying desperately to regain emotional control. The other feels pain deeply too, but processes it privately, maintains dignity, accepts reality slowly. Which person appears more psychologically grounded? Humans answer this question instinctively, and that instinct shapes respect more than words ever will. This does not mean suppressing pain. Pain denied becomes poison. But there is a difference between feeling emotion and becoming consumed by it. Emotionally mature people understand this. They do not worship emotional numbness. They learn emotional discipline. That distinction matters enormously because numb people often lose connection to themselves. Disciplined people remain connected while maintaining control. One is avoidance, the other is mastery. And mastery attracts respect because it demonstrates internal order. People trust individuals who can regulate themselves. A person who collapses emotionally under every challenge becomes difficult to rely on. But someone who can face discomfort without disintegrating creates psychological safety. Safety is one of the hidden foundations beneath respect, not superficial comfort. Deep nervous system safety. Can this person remain stable during conflict? Can they tell the truth under pressure? Can they handle disappointment without cruelty? These questions shape human relationships constantly. Even attraction is influenced by them. People are drawn toward emotional steadiness, not because perfection exists, but because chaos becomes exhausting. Many modern relationships fail not from lack of love, but from lack of emotional regulation. Two wounded nervous systems triggering each other endlessly. One person fears abandonment, the other fears vulnerability. So one chases. The other withdraws, and both secretly feel unseen. Without self-awareness, these patterns repeat for years, but awareness changes destiny. The moment someone recognizes their unconscious behaviors, choice becomes possible, and conscious people move differently through life. They stop blaming everyone for their suffering. They stop expecting relationships to repair identities they never built internally. That realization is painful, but also liberating. Because once you stop demanding the world heal your self-worth, you reclaim power. not power over others, power over yourself. And self-mastery creates respect more reliably than dominance ever will. History is full of loud men who controlled others while secretly lacking control over themselves. Addictions, impulses, ego, anger, fear. External power means little without internal stability. This is why some of the quietest individuals carry the strongest presence. They are internally ordered, and internal order radiates outward. You notice it during conflict especially. While others react impulsively, they observe. While others panic, they breathe. While others seek validation, they remain grounded. That groundedness becomes magnetic, not because it is performative, because it is rare. Most people are emotionally reactive, controlled by moods, controlled by insecurity, controlled by fear. So encountering someone emotionally conscious feels different immediately. Their presence slows the atmosphere, and perhaps this is why ancient philosophies focus so heavily on self-control. Not because emotion is weakness, because unconscious emotion creates suffering. Stoicism was never about becoming cold. It was about becoming difficult to destabilize. There is wisdom in that. Especially in a world constantly trying to provoke reaction, algorithms reward outrage, society rewards performance, conflict generates attention. But attention is not the same as respect. Often the most respected people are not constantly visible. They simply move through life with integrity, quietly, consistently. And consistency matters more than intensity. Anyone can behave well temporarily. Character reveals itself over time. How someone treats people when stressed, how they behave when nobody benefits them, how they respond after gaining power. These moments expose truth. Truth always leaks eventually. A manipulative person may appear charming initially, but eventually contradictions emerge. Small lies, broken promises, emotional inconsistency. The nervous system notices patterns long before the conscious mind fully understands them. That is why people sometimes say, "I can't explain it. Something just feels off." Psychologically, the body is often detecting incongruence. Words and energy do not match, and incongruence destroys trust slowly. Meanwhile, congruent people feel calming. Their words align with actions. Their emotions align with behavior. Their identity feels stable. That stability creates respect naturally, not through force, through coherence. Coherent people are becoming increasingly rare. Modern identity is fragmented. People become different versions of themselves everywhere they go. Different online, different with friends, different at work, different in relationships. And while adaptation is normal, excessive fragmentation creates inner emptiness, because eventually the person no longer knows which version is real. That confusion creates anxiety. A fragmented identity constantly seeks external guidance. What should I say? How should I act? Will people approve? But internally grounded individuals operate differently. Their values guide behavior more than external pressure. That independence creates respect, not because they rebel against everything, because they remain psychologically connected to themselves. And connection to self changes everything. Decision-making, relationships, boundaries, purpose. A disconnected person drifts toward whatever offers temporary validation. A connected person moves intentionally. Intentional people often appear calmer because they are less emotionally scattered. Scattered energy weakens presence. Focused energy strengthens it. This explains why certain individuals feel powerful even without status. Their attention is disciplined. Their emotions are disciplined. Their identity is disciplined. And discipline communicates seriousness to the human mind. People instinctively trust individuals who can delay impulses. Impulsive people create instability. An impulsive person says things they regret, makes promises they cannot keep, destroys relationships during emotional storms. Meanwhile, disciplined people think long-term. They understand temporary emotion should not always control permanent decisions. That wisdom creates respect over time, not instantly, but deeply. And deep respect matters more than temporary admiration. Admiration is often superficial, based on appearance, success, charm. Respect goes deeper. It survives flaws, survives difficulty, survives disagreement, because it is rooted in character, and character becomes visible most clearly during suffering. Pain strips performance away. A person under pressure eventually reveals who they really are. Do they become cruel, dishonest, cowardly, manipulative, or do they remain conscious even while hurting? That distinction shapes destiny. because eventually every human being encounters suffering, loss, failure, rejection, mortality. These experiences humble the ego, and humility, when healthy, deepens wisdom. A humbled person often becomes more compassionate, more patient, less arrogant, because suffering destroys illusions of superiority. It reminds us that everyone carries invisible battles. The confident stranger may secretly feel broken. The smiling woman may feel lonely. The successful man may feel emotionally numb. Once you understand this, your perception of people changes. You stop worshiping appearances. And perhaps that is another hidden layer of respect. Mature respect sees beyond surface performance. It recognizes humanity beneath identity, not idealized humanity. Real humanity, fear, pain, desire, loneliness, hope. This awareness creates emotional depth, and emotionally deep people often become calmer because they understand complexity. They no longer divide the world into heroes and villains so easily. They understand how wounds shape behavior, how fear distorts love, how insecurity creates arrogance. That understanding softens unnecessary judgment, but it also sharpens discernment. Compassion without discernment becomes self-destruction. Many kind people suffer because they mistake tolerance for love. They excuse betrayal repeatedly, excuse disrespect repeatedly, excuse manipulation repeatedly. Not because they are compassionate, because they fear abandonment. Fear disguised as kindness still damages self-respect. This is why healing often requires learning discomfort. The discomfort of saying no, the discomfort of disappointing others, the discomfort of leaving unhealthy environments. Growth rarely feels comfortable initially because the nervous system prefers familiarity, even when familiarity is painful. A toxic relationship can feel emotionally safer than healthy solitude simply because it is familiar. But familiarity is not the same as peace. Many people discover peace only after walking away from environments that constantly violated their nervous system. And once they experience that peace, they cannot tolerate certain chaos anymore. That changes relationships permanently. Standards rise, boundaries strengthen, self-respect deepens, and sometimes loneliness appears temporarily. But loneliness with dignity often heals faster than connection with self-betrayal. Eventually, a person realizes something profound. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your mind. Some people only enter your life to consume energy, attention, validation, stability, and emotionally mature individuals learn discernment without becoming bitter. That balance is difficult. Pain often tempts people towards cynicism. After betrayal, they stop trusting. After heartbreak, they stop opening emotionally. After disappointment, they stop believing in sincerity. But emotional numbness is not wisdom. Wisdom remains open while becoming discerning. Closed hearts protect pain, but also block connection. And connection still matters deeply. Humans are relational creatures. Even the strongest individuals need understanding, need belonging, need emotional safety. The difference is that emotionally grounded people no longer seek these things through self-abandonment. They understand that real connection requires mutual respect. Without respect, intimacy becomes unstable. One person dominates, the other shrinks. One manipulates, the other tolerates. Eventually, resentment poisons everything. Healthy relationships require emotional equality, not identical personalities, not identical strengths, equal humanity. The recognition that both people deserve dignity, and dignity changes communication. A respectful person does not intentionally humiliate during conflict, does not weaponize vulnerability, does not destroy identity to win arguments. Because mature people understand something immature people often forget. You can disagree without dehumanizing. That ability reflects emotional strength. Cruelty is often weakness trying to feel powerful. A wounded ego attacks. A grounded mind responds. And responses shape reputation more than reactions. Over time, people remember how you handled pressure, how you treated others when angry, how you behaved after gaining advantage. Those memories become identity in the eyes of others. Eventually, every human being builds a psychological atmosphere around themselves. Some atmospheres feel draining, chaotic, unpredictable, manipulative. Others feel calming, grounded, honest. And human beings instinctively move toward emotional environments that feel safe. That is why self-work matters, not to become superior, to become conscious. Conscious people create healthier emotional environments. They communicate more clearly, take responsibility more honestly, recognize projections more quickly. Projection is another hidden force behind disrespect. People often attack qualities in others they secretly fear within themselves. An insecure person mocks confidence. A dishonest person suspects betrayal everywhere. An emotionally dependent person criticizes independence. Without self-awareness, the mind externalizes internal conflict. And this is why some criticism should not always be absorbed personally. Sometimes people are speaking more about themselves than about you. Emotionally mature individuals learn this slowly. Not every insult deserves emotional collapse. Not every rejection defines worth. Not every misunderstanding requires endless explanation. Peace increases when you stop demanding universal understanding, because universal understanding is impossible. Some people will misinterpret you no matter how carefully you speak. Some will dislike you no matter how respectfully you behave. And, strangely, accepting this reality creates freedom. You stop exhausting yourself trying to control perception constantly. Instead, you focus on alignment, living truthfully, behaving consistently, protecting dignity. That quiet integrity becomes enough. And perhaps that is the final evolution of respect. Realizing it cannot be forced. You cannot manipulate genuine respect permanently. You cannot perform your way into it endlessly. Eventually, people feel who you are, your nervous system, your emotional patterns, your integrity, your self-awareness. Truth reveals itself through behavior over time, always. And maybe that is why the most respected people are often the least obsessed with being respected, because they are focused on something deeper, living in alignment with themselves. Not perfectly. Honestly, they know they are flawed. They know they carry darkness too, but they no longer run from it. They confront themselves, learn, adjust, grow. That willingness to face reality internally creates unusual psychological strength, a strength quieter than ego, but far more stable. And in the end, stability matters. Beauty fades. Status changes. Public attention disappears, but character leaves emotional echoes inside people. Years later, people may forget your achievements, forget your appearance, forget your words, but they rarely forget how your presence made them feel. Safe, small, calm, anxious, seen, controlled, inspired. Presence is memory, and presence is shaped by the relationship you have with yourself. Someone at war with themselves often spreads chaos unconsciously. Someone at peace with themselves often spreads calm unconsciously. That is why inner work matters more than image, because eventually the soul becomes visible in the eyes, in the voice, in the silence between words. You cannot fake inner stability forever. Life tests everyone eventually. Loss tests identity. Failure tests ego. Rejection tests dignity. Loneliness tests self-worth. And these tests reveal what external success often hides. Who are you when comfort disappears? Who are you when nobody applauds? Who are you when life becomes difficult? Those moments reveal character. And character, more than charm, status, or dominance, is what creates lasting respect. Not fear, not attention. Respect. The kind that survives absence. The kind that survives disagreement. The kind that survives time. Because genuine respect is never merely social. It is psychological, a recognition of inner coherence, inner responsibility, inner truth, and perhaps the deepest truth of all. The moment you stop abandoning yourself to gain acceptance, you begin becoming someone even your own soul can finally respect.